Right. So with a true passion of providing success strategies, Dr. Quianda Harris has continually helped others be their best selves during a 20+ year career. She has served as a licensed professional counselor in multiple states and worked with individuals in various sectors. Early work consisted of individual and group sessions, helping others through challenges of addiction. Dr. Harris has also provided coaching and support to victims of crimes, as well as provided counseling to law enforcement from multiple agencies. She is a licensed professional counselor, mental health service provider, a nationally board certified counselor, and a master addiction counselor with a bachelor in psychology from Hampton University, a master's in counseling from Old Dominion, and an EDD in higher and post-secondary education from Argosy University. She truly understands the complex nature of maintaining good health, mental health, and self-care. The title of the dissertation was Online Counseling, Perceptions of Higher Education Counselors Regarding the Use of Online Counseling with College Students, with a timely study considering limitations brought on by COVID-19 pandemic. She was featured in a blog, Self-Isolation Creates New Distance Consulting Techniques for EDM Digest, Relevant Insights by the Experts from American Military University. She serves as a chairman of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee in the Health and Wellness Department at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. And currently, she is the OVW Grant Project Director for Motlow State Community College and Workforce Dynamics Consultant with the BUMC Employee Assistance Program. Dr. Harris, welcome. We are very excited about this presentation, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, my new friend. Thank you for that introduction. I'm listening to all the stuff in my bio. It's a lot, but a fun fact about me, I am a native Nashvilleian. I am one of the unicorns in Nashville. Right about now, most people you meet are not from here, but I am from Nashville, born and raised. I decided that I wanted to leave, and I went to Virginia, as Angelica mentioned. I went to Hampton for undergrad, ODU for graduate school, worked up there for some years, and then I decided I just wanted to come back to Nashville. So I'm back home now, and as she mentioned, I'm currently with Motlow State and working with this very needed and exciting grant, the Office on Violence Against Women. And so today, we're gonna just talk a little bit about self-care and boundaries. I'm sure you've all been to or heard presentations about self-care, but today I just wanna add just a new dimension to self-care. Let me share my screen. And talk a little bit about how boundary setting is a very important aspect of taking care of yourself. So I want to start off, let's see, by just the learning objectives. Again, we're going to talk about the difference between stress and burnout. You've all probably heard of those two terms as well. I'm gonna spend quite a bit of time just talking about stress because stress comes from a lot of different places, which is our second learning objective, just learning more about things that cause stress that you may not even realize, and just becoming more familiar with the art of boundary setting and saying no, and as using that as a way to practice self-care. So I'm going to start off the presentation with just a mindful moment as everyone focuses on the moment, focuses on this presentation, and just take a minute to think about what do you do for self-care? What is your self-care regimen right about now? And how has that been working for you? Some people may have had to adapt in this past year self-care practices just because of certain limitations, but just take a moment just to think about your daily routine, your weekly routine, and how you take time to take care of yourself. So now, hopefully everyone has a pretty good visual of what you're doing currently, and just keep that in mind as we move through the presentation. Most of us probably spend way more time focused on our work than our personal lives, and that alone is very stressful. We may find ourselves cramming everything else into a very limited amount of time every day, or maybe just a couple of hours on the weekend for social activities, spending time with family and friends, doing things that you just really enjoy. And that obviously is very stressful, because the things that you want to do, the things that you enjoy doing, we might not really have enough time to do. And we find ourselves just, again, trying to make up for the time that we spend at work. You know, even though we have 8-hour work days, a lot of us find ourselves staying an hour or two later, or taking our work home, or working on the weekends to complete tasks. And, you know, and so that leaves us, again, very, very little time to really focus on the enjoyable aspects or things that we have in our lives. And so that leads to the point that stress is an everyday fact. It just is. We cannot avoid stress. It's there. It's caused by lots of different things. And most of us probably have adapted to various stressors that we experience, but hopefully, again, as we go through this presentation, we'll become more aware of additional stressors that we can kind of pay attention to more, and learn how to figure out ways to avoid undue stress or unnecessary stress that we may be inflicting on ourselves without even knowing it. So take a minute to think about where you experience your stress. I'm the type of person, I feel my stress here in my shoulders, in my neck. If I'm really focused on doing something, my neck feels like it's just like this. And when I've gone to get massages, they always say, you need to come back and do this like every 2 weeks at least, because I sometimes am so knotted up in my neck and shoulders, because I'm like this all the time without even knowing it. And that's very important. It's really important to be aware of where you experience that. I experienced it in my neck and shoulders. I also feel it in the pit of my stomach. And sometimes even in the past couple of years, I've noticed that if I'm stressed and just, you know, intense in an intense moment and focused on something, my whole body feels like I'm just like this, and I'm not even really breathing. And so sometimes I have to remind myself just to breathe, because I'm so tense and I'm so focused and I'm not paying attention to my body. And that's something that I can control. I can just be more aware of my body and understanding, okay, I'm stressed out. I need to take a breath. I need to breathe. I need to stretch. I need to do something in that moment. But most of us, a lot of us don't, aren't even really aware of that. So I mentioned we're going to talk a little bit, talk a lot about the sources of stress. Again, stress, we experience it from all over the place. Physiological stress, lack of exercise. So when the pandemic hit, I was still practicing as a counselor at my previous job. And a lot of clients, a lot of people I spoke with, they were really frustrated because they couldn't go to the gyms anymore when the gyms were shut down. And so I would help try to problem solve and say, well, what can you do with the limitations? And, we find ourselves sitting at our desk all day long, only getting up to maybe go to the restroom or to get some water, eating your lunch at your desk and not moving. Just getting up to move is sometimes not a part of our everyday work day, but it's very important because those little things really go a big way. Even if you're not working out 30 minutes or an hour every day, just moving your body helps to reduce stress. Even, if you work from home, getting up to go to the mailbox, walking around the block, being creative in ways that you can move your body, it does help to reduce stress because all these things that you see here are a lot of things that we may even experience on a daily basis. So each of these causes or sources of stress, if we are intentional about being aware of it and trying to do something about it, it can really help to reduce your overall stress load on a daily basis. Lack of sleep, lack of exercise. If you're stressed and tensed and overwhelmed and you go to bed and you can't, relax, you probably aren't sleeping well. And I don't know about you, but sleep is very precious to me. The older I get, the more I appreciate being able to get a good night's sleep. And when I don't sleep well, I don't do well the next day. And it's like you can never really just catch up on your sleep. And that will add to the stress, because if you're not doing well, you're not feeling well, you don't get enough sleep, you're not doing well at work, you're distracted, and then it just throws everything off. Poor nutrition. So Postmates may be your best friend right now, Uber Eats. And yeah, we can make better choices when we eat out, but I know me, when I'm stressed, I don't want a salad. I don't want broccoli. I don't want a smoothie. I want French fries. I want my new Vice crumble cookies. I want cookies. I want those things. I'm not going to be intentional about going through a drive-through and getting a salad. I'm just not. And so understanding that that's something, again, that I have direct control over. And it's okay to eat, those things. There's nothing wrong with it. But if that is your everyday go-to, then you're not putting good things in your body, then you're not going to get good things. You're not going to be able to produce good things. And so nutrition, very important. Your thoughts. Some people may not even think about how your thoughts cause you stress. So if you've ever found yourself trying to interpret what somebody says or what somebody means, or, trying to figure it out in your head and it's swirling around and you just could be this, could be this, could be that, as opposed to one, just asking for clarification or recognizing that you don't have any control over it. Those are things that we do without even understanding how stressful how, you know, that unnecessarily stressful our thoughts can be. And even labeling your present experience, constantly saying, oh, this is horrible, I'm just this, I'm just that. And, you know, those words, those thoughts, and how you perceive your experience, that is obviously gonna continue to perpetuate the stress that you feel. And attempting to predict your future, that is something that I know I've been very, very bad about. As I've gotten older and I've learned and I've grown and I've lived, I understand that it's okay to have plans. It's okay to have goals, aspirations, you know, all of those things. But as we have learned in this past year or so, we absolutely don't really have control over our future. We can plan, we can predict, we will not predict, but we can kind of project based on certain things. We can hope, we can have goals, but none of us expected to experience a global pandemic that would cause so much devastation around the world. And so when we try to predict our future, and it has to be, if you think of it in, it has to be this way, you know, it's just either or, and there's no room for the maybes or the in-betweens or the gray areas, because realistically, that's how life is. It's not all or nothing most times. And so if we put that expectation on ourselves and we think about it in that way, and we attempt to predict the future, when it doesn't happen, we fall apart. It's devastating. It causes even more stress because we had in our minds that this is what it has to be. This is what, and then when it doesn't turn out that way, then, you know, what do we do? Crises, you know, death in the family is obviously a crisis. Over the past year or so, many people have experienced deaths in families, friends, social circles because of this pandemic. And that is understandably very stressful. A health crisis. Again, as I've gotten older and I'm experiencing more health issues, I may not be able to do things like I used to do. And it's not necessarily a crisis, but it is definitely impacting my abilities in my everyday life. And it's stressful. It is stressful, but accepting it makes it less stressful, and realizing that I can do what I can do and ask for help for the rest. And, you know, some things are just out of my control, but constantly focusing on that crisis is just going to continue to add to the stress and possibly make the health crisis worse. Obviously, losing your job abruptly is extremely devastating. Many people lost their jobs in the past year because of lack of revenue, had to close businesses down, and I can only imagine how that felt. And then again, talking about the pandemic, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time focusing on that because we are inundated with that, but we are all in a crisis right now. And it's nothing that we can control. We can do the best things for us, do what we think is best, but this is just a crisis. And so hopefully we've all learned how to adapt and do things around the limitations that have been imposed because of this pandemic. But I think this is something, again, that we all have in common right now, and that is we're all in the middle of a global pandemic, which is definitely a crisis. Other sources of stress, the weather. Before the pandemic hit, Nashville experienced a tornado in some areas, which devastated some communities, some entire blocks, houses. And that was absolutely, it was devastating. It was heartbreaking. Something that was completely out of anyone's control. The weather, even, you know, outside of a tornado, ice, a storm, floods, those things that may not necessarily be present every single day, but when they occur, it adds another level to what we already may be experiencing as it relates to stress. If you live in Nashville, you live in a big city, traffic is probably an everyday source of stress. If you have to drive into work, that's one thing that the pandemic, I guess, was beneficial for some people, being able to work from home, because that the traffic is just, it can be just absolutely maddening and almost anticipatory stress. Going to work, going home from work, you're already in your mind thinking, okay, here we go. And so that is, again, one more thing added to your daily dose of stress. Noise can be extremely frustrating. I'll go back to working from home. Some people may have found themselves working from home, homeschooling, everybody home at the same time, every day. It may have at some times seemed as though it was just a circus going on in your house with all the noise and inability to really focus because of this thing that happened that just prevented people from living our normal daily lives. And so that stress alone, I can imagine, was extremely difficult to adapt your daily work schedule to, when you've got all these other things that you're not used to having. But now you have to do that. And now it's like, so what am I going to do? How am I going to try and make this as least stressful as possible? Now, I have pollen on here for the environment because I am allergic to everything. I always have been. And pollen, when it's pollen season, it is a source of stress for me that is just unbelievable. When I have to park outside, for example, and my car is covered in yellow, it just automatically, I'm thinking, I'm going to be sick. My allergies are going to start. I'm going to have sinus problems. And I'm going to be, because I know that pollen for me is a real stressor. And it does, I mean, I do get sick. Some people, I mean, these are again, little things that we may not even be aware of. But because of, for me, for example, with my allergies, pollen is stressful for me. That's part of the environment. I can't avoid it, but it's there. And then the social stressors. So we all are, employed, most, have a job doing something. Our jobs can be demanding. You may have children, spouses, partners, all wanting and demanding your attention all the time. That's stressful. Even though you may love your spouse, your partner, your children, always wanting your time, that's stressful. Some of us may now be having to consider and be concerned about caring for our aging parents. And not just physically stressful, but mentally and emotionally stressful. It's not easy to see our parents starting to age and realizing that they're not the people who they were, and they're not as, able to be as active and may need assistance. I don't even really need to talk about how finances can be stressful, because I'm sure everyone has at some point experienced some type of financial stressor. Things happen out of the blue. If you have a flat tire, that's an unexpected expense that, you have to endure out of your control. Perfect example, this Sunday, our pipe was leaking, burst or something. So on a Sunday, we had to call a plumber on a Sunday to come and fix this pipe because it had to be fixed. So again, a plumber on a Sunday obviously was not cheap. And it was a totally unexpected expense that it had to be done. But that was a completely unexpected stressor that, you know, that money that went to the plumber to spend 30 minutes fixing something and, you know, charged whatever, could have been used for something else, but, you know, things happen. So that little stressor that was unexpected just added to everything else that I may not have been aware of or may have been aware of, which again compounded the stress that I'm already experiencing. I'm gonna talk about social media just a little bit more today, because I think we all recognize that social media is such a huge part of our lives now. I mean, people are on it all day, every day. And unknowingly, sometimes we subject ourselves to the stress of social media when we don't have to. For example, when Facebook first started, when it became popular years ago, and I joined Facebook and I'm scrolling every day and I'm looking at my friends and people and they're smiling and they're happy and they're doing all of these things and they're jogging a mile and they're food prepping and they're, you know, enjoying life and all this. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, gosh, you know, I need to do better about eating, and I should be food prepping like that, or I should be more active. And, you know, just looking at all these things and you know, not realizing that I'm comparing myself to all these people. I'm comparing myself to people and I'm only seeing a portion of their story, right? We don't see the whole picture. Most people don't post the bad stuff on social media. And so I realized that it was causing me to be, you know, kind of sad and down, and I'm comparing myself to people that, and it wasn't necessary. So I said, no more for me. This was a source of stress that I absolutely had control over. I stopped scrolling. I hardly ever go on social media to post anything. Right now, I love TikTok. It's a couple minutes. I can scroll through, you know, see funny stuff, and that's it. Because I, you know, even though I'm aware that social media, again, people put their best on social media, and I realized that I still feel that twinge of, you know, guilt because I'm not exercising like other people are, or I'm not, you know, doing better about juicing every day and all these things. And so I just had to say, I'm not gonna, that's a stressor that I'm gonna cut out, because I have all this other stuff that I'm experiencing. And this is something that was unknowingly stressful and I could absolutely eliminate from my daily activities. Also, I know recently, and if you all have been keeping up with what's going on, the Brazilian butt lift craze is ridiculous. Like, so many women are having these surgeries because of this appearance that you have to look this way, you know, that this is the standard beauty now. You have to have, you know, the Coke bottle figure, and people are going, you know, to other countries to have these surgeries. And seeing that, for some people, it's like, well, I want to look like that. Well, I need to be, you know, I need to enhance my appearance. And why? You know, because you're, again, comparing yourself to other people and looking at social media and allowing social media to influence your life. Unfortunately, attractiveness is actually, you know, I guess you could say a privilege. I won't go so much into that whole concept, but studies have been shown that the more attractive a person is or is perceived, they're treated better. that's unfortunate. Quick aside, my graduate studies, during my graduate studies, my first year research paper was on the color complex. And I'm specifically speaking of African Americans and how people perceive individuals based on their complexion. And so I was able to take pictures, and it was pictures of women, and make different skin tones. So I had a dark skin, medium tone, and light skin version of one person. And long story short, the lighter the person was, the prettier they were perceived. It could have been the same person, but that person in a dark skin version of themselves was not perceived as beautiful as someone who's light skinned. So again, social media, it can greatly impact our daily lives because we're seeing all these things. We're, feeling that we should be this way, ascribe to this standard of beauty or whatever have you. And that is a stressor that is absolutely unnecessary, and we have control over that. So stress, burnout, what's the difference? Stress is too many pressures that demand too much of you physically and psychologically. So all those things that we just mentioned are everyday stressors. Some are, situational stressors. But as we saw, most of us experience some type of stress on a daily basis, knowingly or unknowingly. Burnout, on the other hand, is about not enough. And, when you're burnt out and you feel just empty, blah, no motivation, you don't care, apathetic. And so as a professional counselor, obviously me being apathetic and having no caring was absolutely unacceptable in my job. And the burnout was real, obviously. As a counselor, I had to be very aware of and in tune up to when I was so stressed and then became burned out, to know that something had to give because I wasn't able to give of myself as efficiently and effectively as I could. So now to kind of the point of the presentation is boundaries, learning how to say no, the art of saying no, and how that is not an easily developed art, skill, whatever you want to call it. And why is it so difficult? Because, it's ironic that we're often encouraged to be innovative and think outside the box and be different and be creative. But it seems that it only when we are maintaining the status quo. So, saying no to some things when you know you are not able to do it, or, you don't believe that this is something that needs to happen. It kind of feels like it may be going against the grain, but it's the irony of it all. On the one hand, we're supposed to be these things, especially in leadership positions. But on the other hand, the expectation may be that we always say yes. And so therein lies the conflict. And that fear of conflict it makes it difficult to say no. Most people, I don't know anyone who really likes conflict, but conflict is, it's just, it is. If you work with people, if you work in an organization, if you're part of a team, you are undoubtedly going to experience conflict at some point in time. So to be afraid of it means that you'll probably overextend yourself and say yes a lot of times when you don't want to say yes. And that is causing you more harm than good because you're afraid of the possible conflict. And you don't want to be criticized because you want to be a team player. You want to appear as though I'm a part of this and I'm easy to get along with. And so fear, and I often would say, fear keeps you stuck because it won't let you move forward. You can't go anywhere. It just keeps you in this one position. So fear of being criticized, and then the fear of not belonging, feeling as though I have to go along to get along, and I have to, if everybody else is saying yes, I have to say yes, or, everybody's being doled out tasks, and I'm expected to say yes, but I know I don't have the bandwidth to do it. I don't have the energy to do it. I don't have the time to do it. But if I don't say yes, then they're not going to see me as being a part of the team. But sometimes saying no is just necessary. It's necessary. And back to the topic, it is a part of and a way to take care of yourself. I came across this blurb here in a Forbes business article where this person wrote a few examples of powerful men who consider no to be an important part of success. And, it kind of struck me. We probably don't think of saying no as it relates to being successful. But when you think about it, that makes perfect sense. Steve Jobs, for example, said, focusing is about saying no. Warren Buffett, this man has more money than than he will ever be able to spend in his lifetime. And he was quoted as saying, we need to learn the slow yes and the quick no. And that really resonated with me because, again, back to that fear of not belonging, fear of conflict, fear of criticism, it may prompt us to say yes before really thinking about it and say, no, but wait a minute, maybe, as opposed to the other way around. So learning the slow yes and the quick no. And the art of leadership is saying no, not saying yes. Because again, it's real easy to say yes. It's very easy to say yes because we don't want to go against the grain. We want to be perceived as whatever. And it's easy to say yes, but it's so very difficult for a lot of us to say no. And so when we find ourselves constantly going along to get along, saying yes when we really don't want to, we're not being our authentic selves. And if we think about that and we commit ourselves to be authentic and are intentional about being who we are, without the fear of conflict or criticism or not belonging, and being okay with me, you are going to be less stressed. Because if you are living, as people say, your truth, and you're not really concerned about or not concerned too much about being criticized or, what people see you as or what they say about you. So that's one way to limit your stress, and setting that boundary with yourself, saying no, I'm not going to let these things impact me because these are the things that I have control over. When you are your authentic self, you don't feel as isolated because more than likely, hopefully you have people in your circle and your group of friends and, people who you're around who accept you for you, and you're able to be your authentic self. And, some people your friends may want you to go out with them, for example, on the weekend, but you're just really tired and you want to say yes, and you want to go out, but you say no. And they may say, oh, well, you never go out. And you just say, no, I'm not going to go. They're still going to be your friends. So you're not going to be isolated. You're not going to be lonely, because if you are living your truth, being your authentic self, understanding that it's okay to set boundaries, say no, and it's still okay, you are okay, then that is one less thing that you can take off of your shoulders, one less burden to have to weigh you down every day with the various things that we experience that cause us stress. And so just a few tips to remember. Limit your news and social media intake. I cannot stress that enough because, again, oftentimes we don't even think about how the news and social media is an unnecessary stressor for us, because we're watching, you know, a lot of the news and it's just stuff happening all the time, or the social media, and looking at all these things that I wish I had, I should be this, I should be that. Unnecessary stress. So if you're one of those people, and if you're honest with yourself and those are things that you do, that's something that maybe you can consider paying more attention to and being more intentional about limiting, because again, that's something that you can directly impact as far as your daily stress. Maintain supportive surroundings. Again, if you have people who are your friends, your true friends, and accept you for who you are, then you know that it's okay to be you and they're still going to be your friends. Boundary setting is self-care. I had a colleague who, she has a family, she has children, she works, but she had just a hard boundary that she set, and that was with her sleep. She knew for her, she needed X amount of hours every night so that she could be her best self. She did not allow anyone or anything to take away from that. That was just a boundary. That was a hard no. I'm sorry, I'm going to bed at this time, because she knew that was important to her. And that was a part of her self-care regimen, her daily, one thing that she could do every day to take care of herself is by saying, you know, this is my boundary. And it could be for you limiting your news and social media intake. Setting boundaries, even with yourself, is a form of self-care. And it's not selfish. You know, sometimes we feel guilty if we say no, if we set that boundary. You know, I'm not being a good whatever if I say no, or, you know, maybe I am being selfish, or I could have done this. But trust your gut. You know, your gut, your instinct knows that you're at capacity. You know, I don't have any more bandwidth for this. I can't take on another task, even though it may need to be done, or I don't want to be criticized, but I know that if I say yes, I'm going to be mad at myself. I'm going to be more tired, etc. So taking care of yourself is self-care, period. Taking care of yourself, setting boundaries, saying no, it is not selfish. And again, if you are being who you are, if you are being your authentic self, then you're okay with that. You're okay with that boundary. And again, just say no. You know, there was that campaign years ago, just say no to drugs, but this is just saying no, period. You know, it's okay to say no. It's okay to not take on that position, that, you know, task in the committee, whatever it is. You can just say no. You can learn the art of saying no. It doesn't have to be just a no, I'm not going to do that. But sometimes that may be necessary. But just saying no is okay, because you can't keep just doing everything, saying yes to everything, overextending yourself all the time, because nobody is going to take care of you. They're just going to keep piling it on. They're not going to say, oh, well, maybe you need to take a break. If you don't say no, if you don't set the boundary, nobody else is going to do that for you, because everybody needs balance. I've used this slide before. Again, saying yes to everything, trying to do it all, is just impossible. It's not sustainable. So there has to be some level of balance, you know, eliminating the unnecessary stressors, being more intentional and being your authentic self, realizing that self-care is not selfish, will help in your daily routine of self-care. That's just one more skill, one more tool to add to your toolbox, as a way to cope, as a way to manage, as a way to deal with life and the stress that we are undoubtedly going to experience.
Dr. Harris, if I may, we have a question in the chat for you. Dr. Wilkes asks, Dr. Harris, do you have some sample scripts of how to say no? At one time, I read a book titled The Best Yes. It gave examples of how you can tell people no. With practice, it will become more natural to tell people no.
Don't have any scripts. I could definitely find some or come up with some. And typically that's what I would do. It would be a specific instance that someone would say, you know, I'm having a hard time, and I would just problem solve and role play even, you know, if someone asks you to do something and say, well, you know, now is not a good time for me, or I can't take anything else on right now. I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm gonna have to pass. You know, there are lots of different ways that you can say no, tactfully, respectfully, but still setting that boundary of saying no. And it is difficult, and some people may not like it. And sometimes you have to be a broken record, because some people will continue to push and push and push, and no, I can't do that. No, I appreciate the opportunity and the consideration from me, but no, I can't. And well, you could just, well, maybe you could, no. And that alone is very powerful. And it was very powerful for me, just realizing that some people will just kind of push you, you know, and try to push the limits and manipulate you even into saying yes. But being a broken record, and however tactfully, artfully, respectfully you say no, continuing to stick to that. So I don't have any scripts to answer the question, but there definitely are various ways to handle saying no when somebody absolutely wants you to say yes.
Thank you. Dr. Harris, I have a question for myself, if I may. As a young professional, it's sometimes hard for me to say no because I have the fear of missing out, and I take those opportunities seriously, as an opportunity to prove myself in a sense. And I have a hard time saying no. Do you have any tips, I guess, for me that I could use?
Let me say, I completely understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. And if you know that you can't take something else on because you're just stretched too thin, what's the next best thing? Could you do a portion of it that wouldn't be too bad? Could you maybe say, you know, how about in another month I can revisit this? Or, you know, negotiating a way to still be able to participate or to gain this experience without overextending yourself. Or are there things that you have on your plate that you could ask for help to help manage so that you could be a part of whatever opportunity that it is that you want to engage in? And I learned that as a young professional. I had a great mentor that said to me, one of the best ways that you can practice good mental health is to ask for help. And so again, if you have all these things on your plate and you can ask for help with some of them so that you can have more bandwidth, more time, more space for something that you really want to do, then that's, you know, that's something to consider and to figure out, because you don't want to overextend yourself, because when you overextend, you know, you're stressed, you don't sleep, you're not, and you run the risk of still not being able to be effective, efficient, and put your all into it because you just can't. So figuring out the next best thing, negotiating with yourself even, so that you can do the things that you want to do and give it your all.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Harris at this time? I know for me, Dr. Harris, I enjoyed your piece on social media. When I went back to school, I had to delete all of my social media accounts to focus on school because my end game, my goal was graduation, and it helped me so much. It removed that stressor.
Absolutely. It's quite distracting, and it can cause so many problems that we're not even aware of. And so taking that off the plate is sometimes necessary.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like everyone's chiming in and thanking you for your presentation.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I, again, hope that you have gained just one more tool to add to your toolbox in helping you to take better care of yourself, recognizing the things that you can control, things that you can't, learning how to say no, the art of saying no, and remembering that taking care of yourself is not at all selfish.
Absolutely. I appreciate those words. If everyone wouldn't mind, I've posted in the chat a link to a survey for us. You wouldn't mind just taking a few minutes to fill that out for us. We do have another Wet Wednesday, I believe, coming up next month. So if you're interested in attending, that information can be found on social media or on the Wet website. We also have the Wet conference. That registration is open at this time, and the Wet conference is on October 15th if you all are interested in joining us. And thanks so much for coming, and we'll hopefully see you at the next one.
Thank you.